When the storms of life hit, what is the anchor that keeps you from drifting away? We explore the stories of faith, love, and loyalty that hold us together when everything else falls apart. Subscribe today and find your own anchor in our stories.
I'm sitting in a corner office on the 14th floor of a building I own, looking out at a city that tried to bury me alive. And I keep thinking about the look on my daughter's face when I walked through those doors. She had expected me to crumble. She had planned on it. My name is Sylvette Morgan, and for 19 years, my only daughter convinced herself, and everyone around her, that I was the reason her life went wrong. I need to tell you how I got here, not because I want sympathy. Lord knows I've had enough of that from strangers who heard pieces of my story and filled in the rest with whatever made sense to them. I'm telling you because somewhere out there is a woman sitting in a parking lot, crying into a fast food napkin, wondering if she will ever stop feeling like the villain in someone else's story. I was that woman, and I want her to know what happened next. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, the youngest of 4 children. My mother worked the early shift at a textile plant for 31 years. My father drove a delivery truck until his knees gave out. We were not rich. We were not comfortable. We were the kind of people who knew exactly how much was left in the checking account at all times, because the number mattered in a way it doesn't when you have enough. I watched my parents move through the world with quiet dignity, and I told myself I would do the same. I would work hard, keep my head down, and build something they could be proud of. I married at 26. My husband, my ex-husband, came from what people in Raleigh called a good family, which meant his mother had a big house and an opinion about everything. I should have paid more attention to that second part. His mother's name was Celestine. She was a woman who wore her hair in a silver chignon, even on casual Sundays, and who never said a cruel thing directly. She said it sideways. She said it with a pause before she smiled. She said it by asking questions that weren't really questions. "Oh, you're still doing things that way?" she would ask, tilting her head just slightly. And somehow by the time the sentence was finished, I felt 2 inches shorter than when it started. I thought I could win her over. I thought if I was patient enough, gracious enough, if I showed up to every holiday and learned to cook the dishes she liked and bit my tongue when she undermined me in front of my own children, eventually she would see that I was a good woman. I gave that effort 19 years. She never saw it. Or maybe she did and decided it didn't matter. My daughter's name is Cressida. She is 41 years old now. She was a beautiful child, serious, watchful, the kind of little girl who noticed everything and stored it away like she was building a case. I adored her. I used to say she was my heart walking around outside my body. I said that right up until the year she turned 22 and started spending more and more time at her grandmother's house and less time returning my calls. The shift was gradual. That's what made it so hard to name. There was no single moment where everything changed. It was more like the tide going out. You don't notice it leaving, and then you look up and you're standing on dry sand wondering where the water went. Celestine had been whispering to my daughter for years. I didn't know the extent of it until much later, but the short version is this. My mother-in-law spent the better part of a decade telling my daughter that I had been cold, controlling, and selfish. That I had made her son miserable. That I was the reason the marriage had struggled. She had a talent for taking true things. I was direct, I was organized, I had strong opinions about how our household ran, and turning them into evidence of something sinister. A direct woman becomes a bully. An organized woman becomes controlling. A woman with standards becomes someone impossible to love. My ex-husband, his name is Reuben, never corrected her. He was the kind of man who needed peace above all else, which sounds like a virtue until you understand that for him it meant agreeing with whoever was in the room. When he was with me, he agreed with me. When he was with his mother, he agreed with her. And his mother was always there. By the time Cressida was in her late 20s, she had built an entire version of her childhood in which I was the source of everything painful. The divorce, which happened when she was 15, became my fault entirely. The tension in the house when she was growing up, mine. The years when she felt unseen or pressured, traced back, always to me. I tried to talk to her about it. I tried more times than I can count. Every conversation ended the same way. She would say I was being defensive, and I would end up apologizing for things I hadn't done just to keep the door open between us. I thought if I kept apologizing, she would soften. What I didn't understand then was that my apologies were being received as confessions. The worst year was when she stopped speaking to me entirely. No call on my birthday, No card at Christmas. Nothing. I found out she had told people, mutual friends, distant relatives, a woman at her church, that her mother was toxic, that word. I had seen it used on the internet, but I had never imagined it would be used about me by my own child. I went to a therapist. A good one. A woman named Dr. A chibi who did not let me wallow and did not let me rage. She asked me once what I was most afraid of, and I said I was afraid that Cressida was right. That maybe I had done damage I couldn't remember doing. That maybe I was the villain and didn't know it. Dr. Achibi looked at me for a long moment and said, that fear, the willingness to ask that question honestly, is not something cruel people do. I held on to that. I held on to it the way you hold on to a railing in the dark. During those years, I was working at an insurance company, mid-level management, the kind of job that pays the bills and asks nothing of your soul. I had done it for 17 years. I was good at it. I moved up slowly, the way Black women move up in corporate spaces. Twice as hard, half the credit, smile through it. I had always told myself I would eventually start my own thing. I had a business idea that I had been writing in notebooks for years. A property management company focused on affordable senior housing, something I had watched my own parents need and struggle to find. I had the knowledge. I had the contact. I had been telling myself I would do it when the time was right for so long that the phrase had started to feel like a prayer I didn't believe in anymore. The year my daughter stopped speaking to me, I started the company. I don't say that to make it sound noble or poetic. The truth is messier than that. The truth is I had two choices: fall apart or build something. I am my mother's daughter. I built something. I named the company Steadfast Properties. I rented a small office in a strip mall in Durham with water-stained ceiling tiles and a parking lot that flooded when it rained hard. I hired one part-time assistant, a young woman straight out of community college who knew nothing about property management, but had extraordinary organizational instincts and was hungry to learn. I worked 12-hour days. I ate dinner at my desk. I went home to a quiet apartment and lay awake doing math in my head, calculating whether the numbers would hold another month. They held. Then they grew. By the third year, I had managed to secure 2 contracts with county housing authorities, which gave us stability. By the 5th year, we had a staff of 11 and were managing 43 properties across 3 counties. By the 8th year, I was being written up in a regional business journal as one of the more innovative minds in senior affordable housing in the Southeast. The journalist who wrote the piece called me quietly determined. I cut it out and kept it. Through all of it, I heard almost nothing from my daughter, occasionally a text on a holiday, brief and careful, like someone maintaining a fence line. Once a phone call when she needed a piece of paperwork from my end for something to do with her taxes, I answered. I helped. I kept my voice level and warm. When she hung up without asking how I was doing, I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I trusted myself to drive. Then, 18 months ago, I received an invitation in the mail. Cressida was getting married. She had been with her partner, a man named Aldous whom I had met exactly twice, for 4 years. The invitation was beautiful. Heavy cream paper with gold lettering. My name was on it. I held it for a long time. My assistant, seeing my face, asked if I was all right. I said I didn't know yet. My first instinct was joy, pure and uncomplicated. My daughter was getting married and she had invited me. For one bright moment, standing there in that strip mall office that had become something real, I let myself believe this was the beginning of something healing. Then I called my sister, who lives in Charlotte and who has always been the one I go to when I need someone to tell me the truth. Her name is Odessa. She is 4 years older than me, and she has known Celestine for as long as I have. She listened while I read her the invitation, and then she was quiet for a moment. "Sil," she said finally, "did you talk to Brenda?" Brenda is a cousin of mine who is friendly with a woman who moves in some of the same church circles as Celestine. Small world. Too small sometimes. I called Brenda. Brenda hemmed and hawed for a bit and then told me what she'd heard. That Cressida had told people she'd invited me because it's the right thing to do. That her grandmother had reportedly said at a family dinner that I would never come, because I was too proud or too bitter, or some version of the story that made me the obstacle. That someone in that circle had apparently suggested this was a chance to show everyone what kind of woman I really was. That I would either refuse and look cold-hearted, or I would show up alone and humbled, and it would be clear to everyone in that room how far I had fallen from the life Reuben's family represented. I sat with that for 3 days. On the 4th day, I called my attorney to discuss some routine matters related to a new property acquisition. We were in the middle of a significant deal. The purchase of a small apartment complex that would be converted into senior housing, our largest project to date. I mentioned that I had a family event coming up and needed to make sure my schedule was clear. She congratulated me on the deal and mentioned, not for the first time, that what I had built in 8 years was genuinely remarkable. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and looked around my office. Not the strip mall office. We had moved 2 years earlier into a proper suite on the 14th floor of a building downtown. My name was on the door. The woman my ex-mother-in-law had spent years quietly dismantling had turned out to be someone worth looking at. I RSVP'd yes. Then I called a service I had used once before for a business event when I needed a car that made a statement. I reserved a Bentley Mulsanne for the day of the wedding. Not to show off. Let me be clear about that. I am 63 years old and I have never been interested in showing off. I reserved it because I had spent 19 years shrinking in that family's presence, and I was not going to walk into that room as though I were there to ask permission to exist. I also called Odessa and asked if she would come with me. She said she had already booked her train ticket. The wedding was held at a historic estate about 40 miles outside of Raleigh, the kind of place that does weddings on weekends as a business. Manicured grounds, a restored farmhouse, catering staff in matching black. It was genuinely beautiful. I will give them that. We arrived, Odessa and I, in the Bentley, which Odessa had already described 3 times as too much and exactly right. And I cannot believe you did this in the span of about 15 minutes. The driver pulled up to the entrance and came around to open the door. I stepped out in a deep burgundy suit I had purchased 2 weeks before, fitted, understated, the kind of clothes that say I didn't have to try very hard. Odessa, God bless her, looked magnificent beside me. I heard the murmuring before I had even taken 5 steps. I saw Celestine first. She was standing near the entrance with a cluster of women her age, and the moment she saw me, her expression went through several things in very quick succession. Surprise, recalibration. Something that might have been, briefly, respect, before it closed off behind composure. I nodded to her. Just once. Pleasantly. I kept walking. I saw Reuben across the courtyard. He looked older, which I suppose we all do. He stared at me for a moment and then looked away. And then I saw Cressida. She was in a room off the main hall with her bridesmaids. Door half open, still in her getting ready state with her hair partially done and a robe over her dress. One of her friends saw me first and said something, and Cressida turned. She had been crying earlier, I could tell. Happy crying, wedding day crying, the kind that's normal and good. But when she saw me, she went very still. Her eyes traveled from my face to what I was wearing, to Odessa behind me, and I watched her do the math. I watched her understand that whatever script she had been handed about this moment was not the script I had shown up with. I smiled at her, not triumphant, not wounded, just real. You look beautiful, I said, because she did. She opened her mouth and closed it again. Her maid of honor, a young woman I didn't recognize, was looking between us like she wasn't sure whether to stay or leave. Mom, Cressida said finally. Just that one word. I didn't rush toward her. I didn't fill the silence with words, which is what I would have done 19 years ago. What I would have done 10 years ago. What I would have done even 2 years ago. I had learned, slowly and at considerable cost, that some silences need to breathe. I'm glad I'm here, I said. I'll let you finish getting ready. I walked to my seat. Odessa, who had been watching all of this with the focused attention of someone at a championship match, sat beside me and exhaled slowly. Well, she whispered. Don't, I said. I wasn't going to say anything. You were. She smiled and patted my hand, and we said nothing else for a while. The ceremony was lovely. It was. Whatever complications lived in the history of that family, Cressida had built something good with Aldous. I could see it in the way they looked at each other, the way his hand found hers without looking, the way she laughed at something he whispered right before the officiant said his first words. I cried a little. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. The reception was where things unraveled for Celestine. I don't know what she had expected. Perhaps that I would sit quietly at whatever peripheral table they'd assigned me and be grateful for the invitation. Perhaps she thought the presence of so much family, Reuben's family, her family, people who had heard her version of events for 19 years, would be enough to make me feel small. Perhaps she thought I would come looking for a fight or an apology, and she could position herself accordingly. What she got instead was me at a table near the center of the room, well-dressed, well-accompanied, talking easily with people I hadn't seen in years, not performing happiness but genuinely finding some, People who didn't know the history came up to speak to me, the way people speak to someone who seems settled in themselves. A few relatives who I had always liked made a point of finding me. At some point during the cocktail hour, I was standing near the bar talking with one of Ruben's cousins, a man named Garrison who had always been straightforward with me and who now ran a law firm in Atlanta. And Celestine approached. She greeted Garrison first, which gave her a moment to arrange herself. Then she turned to me. "Sylvette," she said, "you look well." "Thank you, Celestine," I said. "So do you." There was a pause. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure either," I said. "But she's my daughter." Another pause. Garrison, to his credit, was very still. "Things have a way of working themselves out," Celestine said, with that particular tone she used when she wanted to sound magnanimous. "They do," I agreed. I smiled at her. "It's good to see you." And I turned back to Garrison and resumed the conversation. I could feel her standing there for a moment before she moved away. I did not let myself watch her go. What happened next, I did not witness directly. Odessa told me later. Odessa said that about an hour into the reception, Celestine apparently approached Cressida with something she wanted addressed. Something about the seating, something about my presence at a table that Celestine felt was more central than appropriate. Something along those lines. Odessa said she watched Cressida's face go through the same kind of rapid internal movement I had seen earlier. And then, Odessa said, Cressida said something very quiet and very clear to her grandmother, and Celestine went pale. Odessa didn't hear the words. She was too far away. But she watched Celestine turn and walk to a corner of the room, and she watched Cressida stand there for a moment, and then Cressida looked across the room and found me. She held my gaze for a few seconds. Then she nodded, just slightly, and went back to her guests. I turned back to the people I was talking to. My heart was doing something complicated and large, but I kept my face pleasant and my voice steady. Some moments you have to let happen at their own pace. You can't chase them. Before the end of the evening, Cressida found me. It was late in the reception, maybe 9 o'clock. The band was playing something slow, and the older guests were thinning out. Aldous was talking with his groomsmen across the room, and Cressida walked toward me with the careful, slightly unsteady step of a woman in heels after several hours of a wedding. She sat down beside me without being asked. For a moment we just looked out at the room together. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I know," I said. "I thought." She stopped. Started again. "I think I thought you wouldn't. Or that if you did, it would be." She stopped again. "A scene," I offered. "Yeah." Her voice was quiet. "I'm 63 years old," I said. "I'm past scenes." She almost smiled. "Not quite. What you've built," she said. "The company. I've been." She seemed to be choosing words carefully. "I've been reading about it. The work you're doing with the housing. I didn't know. You didn't ask," I said. Gently, but clearly. She looked down at her hands. "No," she said. "I didn't." The band shifted to something with a little more movement. Across the room, someone laughed loudly, and the sound broke the moment gently, the way a sound does when it's not unwelcome. "I believed things," Cressida said finally, "that I should have questioned. I was angry, and it was easier to have a target. And you were." "Available," I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were filling. "I'm not here to make you cry on your wedding day," I said. "Mom, I mean it. This is your day. We have time. After this, we have time. If you want it." She reached over and took my hand. Just held it. She didn't say anything else, and neither did I. We sat there for a while with the music going, and the evening winding down around us. That was 18 months ago. Things between us have not been suddenly perfect. That is not how it works, and I would not trust it if it were. We have been learning each other again, slowly, with a lot of pauses and careful words and occasional steps backward. She has a therapist now, and she has been doing, from what I can tell, the kind of hard work that requires looking honestly at things you have spent years not wanting to see. I respect that more than I can say. Celestine has, from what I understand, not adapted particularly well to the new configuration. That is her business, not mine. I closed the door on managing her perception of me some years ago, and I do not intend to open it again. Reuben called me about 6 months after the wedding. He said he owed me an apology. He said he was sorry for the years of not saying anything when he should have. It was a brief call. He didn't have a lot of language for what he was trying to do. I accepted it without ceremony and wished him well. I meant it. The anger I had carried for him for so many years had gotten heavy, and I had set it down somewhere on the road to Durham and never gone back for it. Steadfast Properties is in its 9th year. We are now managing 97 units across 5 counties. with a wait list for every property we operate. We broke ground 8 months ago on the largest project we have ever undertaken, a 60-unit senior housing development in Wake County, the first of what I intend to be many. The woman who started the company in a flooded strip mall parking lot would not have believed this version possible. But she built it anyway, a decision at a time, a year at a time. Last week, my daughter called me on a Tuesday afternoon for no particular reason. Not a holiday, not a task she needed done. She called to tell me about something funny that had happened at work. And we talked for 40 minutes about nothing important and everything that mattered. And when we hung up, I sat at my desk and looked out at the city and felt something I hadn't felt in so long I had almost forgotten what it was. It was ordinary. Just an ordinary phone call from my daughter. I had waited 19 years for ordinary, and it turned out to be the most extraordinary thing I had ever been given.